Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Wednesday Wellbeing video. I realise it's been a tough couple of weeks for us, and that we're just coming to terms with the disappointing news about the local lockdown, and then new national restrictions, and then additional new local measures starting today. And then yesterday it was announced that there have now been 1 million deaths due to coronavirus globally. I personally am finding it hard to think about having all these restrictions over winter time, a time when I personally tend to struggle anyway. And I think we need to be kind to ourselves and allow ourselves to be sad about the changes at a time when it feels like we're going backwards, potentially. It may be helpful to go back and have a look at some of the earlier Wednesday Wellbeing videos for a refresher at this time. But this week I'm going to be talking about a subject I've seen covered a bit in the media in the last couple of weeks. It's a controversial subject, and that is fake news and conspiracy theories relating to coronavirus. Now, I'm not going to go through all the theories and misinformation that's out there and pick it apart, but I'm going to look more broadly at what we mean by these terms, how these come into being and spread, and the impact that they have on us and on our society. Fake news is quite an ambiguous term in itself, and it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, and it's perhaps more helpful to use the term false news, because fake news implies a deliberate intent to deceive, which may or may not be the case. So false news can be divided up into misinformation, which is usually shared by well-intentioned people and is often based on a grain of truth somewhere, but somewhere along the line the facts have got a bit distorted or misinterpreted, or it may be that old information has been discredited as knowledge grows about coronavirus is still being shared. Disinformation is a bit more sinister. And it's defined as being the deliberate attempt to mislead people with fabricated information. Among both types, you'll find lots of claims about fake cures for coronavirus, claims that vaccines have existed all this time but have been withheld, all these kinds of things. We have no laws at present to regulate either form of fake news being spread through the internet, but the government are working towards creating legislation to cover this. Conspiracy theories start with a disbelief in the generally accepted explanation for a situation, like a major event such as a pandemic, and they provide an alternative explanation, usually involving secret plots involving powerful people that are deliberately hidden from the public. A common feature of conspiracy theories is the distrust of officials and official organisations, such as governments. Again, they may originate from a small grain of truth. There is usually a lot of misinformation and disinformation used as evidence to persuade people to accept these theories. And you've probably heard about a number of the conspiracy theories relating to coronavirus, including some relating to 5G or Bill Gates, or some saying that coronavirus doesn't even exist, and that has been made up by the governments in the world. False news and conspiracy theories are a big issue at the moment because of the pandemic. We're all worried, we're all uncertain and seeking answers, which our governments and scientists haven't always been able to provide, as the virus has been new and knowledge has been limited, and there's scientists are still learning about the virus itself. Coupled with that is the extra time we've had at home with our devices, and a huge volume of websites out there and social media. And studies of hashtags used on social media have shown that the sharing of conspiracy theories or related information has shot up when the country went into lockdown. And that is conspiracy theories relating to coronavirus and unrelated to coronavirus. Some disinformation starts from scammers wanting to make money out of a situation. So they might claim that they can sell you a cure, for example. Sometimes it might be a not very funny joke that some people have taken literally and have been shared and taken off in that way. And sometimes officials and politicians may share false or distorted information to win public favour or to gain power. Sometimes world governments or extremist political groups share false information to further their own aims, to weaken or disrupt other nations or other governments. Conspiracy theorists are a common source of false information, as I've already said, and often the information is made to look like it has come from someone trustworthy. So in the case of coronavirus, it might be that they've set up fake Facebook accounts as doctors and so on, and that they're sharing information through fake accounts. Research has found that false information can actually spread faster and further than accurate factual information, which has the potential to be quite problematic at a time like this, when we really need clear, accurate information more than ever. And sometimes this situation has been exacerbated because government information may have been vague or confusing to us. It can be easy to be dismissive or condescending about people who believe false news or conspiracy theories, but all of us hold false beliefs to some degree, even if it's that we have unrealistic optimism, for example. Psychological research shows that we tend to have an inherent need for certainty or for a belief that everything happens for a reason. And this can make us predisposed to accept false information, especially when factual knowledge is limited or a tragedy appears to be a random accident. And if we have never been taught to critically evaluate information, it can be difficult to distinguish between fact and fiction. And schools actually these days are addressing this more and more for exactly this reason. So disinformation, that is the deliberately false. Disinformation, that is the deliberately false information, is often presented in a way that makes us feel strong emotions, whether that's anger, revulsion, sadness, fear, or whatever. And these emotions make us feel that it's important information that we have a responsibility to pass on. So we like the post, we share the post, and then our friends and family have the same response and do the same. Or perhaps we're not certain whether the information is correct or not, but if it is right, then the implications are so significant that we feel we must share it just in case. But does it actually matter? whether people believe or spread false news or conspiracy theories. Evidence early on in the coronavirus pandemic seemed to imply that spreading false news wasn't as consequential as often believed. But new research on a global scale, published in the American Journal of Tropical Medicine, that has focused on the impact of misinformation. This research has found nearly 2,500 pieces of misinformation or rumour or false theories about COVID-19, and found that people have died by following misinformation, whether by using fake cures or supposed preventative measures or ignoring symptoms. There's increasing evidence to suggest that more people are believing in false information, and that this is affecting compliance with government regulations. With the large volume of false information that we see, and we tend to see it every day if we're out going on social media, it can become harder to distinguish between real and fake news. Not only that, but psychologists have identified that when we start to believe false information, we also start to doubt the accurate or factual information, especially if we don't fully understand it. So then we start to not believe the scientific evidence, and we start to lose our trust in official sources of information. And then we can progress on to believing in conspiracy theories. And it becomes a sort of progression from one to the next. Of course, this doesn't always happen, but when it does, sometimes people can get dragged further and further into the world of conspiracy theories, and sometimes into the darker corners of the web, and can become, in effect, addicted to reading these websites and watching videos, to the detriment of their relationships, their personal lives, their work and family lives. I'm a member of a support group on Facebook. Recently, a woman shared really quite harrowing story about her partner, and how over the last 18 months or so, he's become more and more involved with these conspiracy theory websites, and become more and more obsessed with these theories, and with sharing them on the internet and trying to convince people. But it most certainly has infected his personal life. He's more or less completely disengaged from family life now. He tends to barely notice the existence of his children, or his wife. He spends a lot of time trying to convince his wife of all these theories and gets upset when she won't believe him. He rarely washes. He's lost his job, and obviously it's impacted on his mental health significantly, and mental health of his family and the people who care for him. To the people around him, the things he believes in sound utterly ridiculous, but it's been part of a progression, and so he's barely noticed the change. If this sounds like somebody you know, there is a BBC video that I will share a link to with some good advice on how to talk to people about conspiracy theories, and I will link to that in the comments. But it's probably going to be helpful to get them to speak to their GP or to a counsellor as well. There's currently some concern that false news and conspiracy theories are accelerating the spread of coronavirus, as they influence people's behaviours to do with coronavirus. Although it's something it's very difficult to prove or disprove for certain. The MP for South East Bolton in Lancashire, Yasmin Qureshi, has expressed concern recently about her constituency, saying that many people in the area believe that the virus is fake, that the government has made it up in order to exert control over the population, and that as a result they were refusing to adhere to social distancing guidelines or to wear masks. At the point where she made these comments, Bolton had the highest rate of infection in England and was among the worst hit areas in Europe, and infections had been doubling every 4 days. Now, Bolton isn't the only such place, but as I say, it's hard to prove that there's a link between the spread of the beliefs and the rising numbers, but certainly you can't rule out a link. So I suppose that the question we should ask now is, what can we do about the spread of fake news and or conspiracy theories, or indeed should we do anything about them? As I mentioned at the beginning, the government is in the process of developing legislation to regulate the spread of false information, but there are things that we can do for ourselves. So if you aren't sure about a post on social media, for example, try searching for it on an independent fact-checking website, of which there are many. I will put links to some of the most well-known ones in the comments. The BBC do have a fact-checking page. You may want to argue that the BBC aren't independent in that they are connected to the government, but there's many others. There's Full Fact, there's Snopes, there's That's Nonsense. There's a Channel 4 one called Fact Check, and there's another one called factcheck.org. The list goes on. Many of these fact-checking websites have good advice on how to fact-check information on social media posts for yourself as well. The BBC Reality Check has a number of short, easy to follow videos about false news and how to spot it and how to fact check for yourself and so on. And in many cases it can take under a minute to identify a piece of fake news. So say that you see a post that says bananas can cure coronavirus. Now, to my knowledge, they can't, and nobody has ever suggested they can. But say you saw a post claiming that. A quick internet search for bananas coronavirus fact check should bring up several links to fact-checking sites, and you can follow any of those links, and the sites should explain whether it's true or not and how they know this, maybe even some alternative information. You might still be uncertain because you might be dubious about the legitimacy of that fact-checking site, so go back and check another of the links. If you feel you don't have time to check, it's probably best not to share the post. And something to think about before you share any social media post are the 5 W's. And I will put a link to more information about this in the comments. The United Nations are having quite a drive on misinformation at the moment. And they have started a website called Verified. It's a new project about sharing accurate, tested information that has been fact-checked and double-checked. And it's information relating to coronavirus. And you can, if you want to, sign up to go on their mailing list, and you can choose whether you have updates from them every day or every week. It's up to you. And they are encouraging people to share the accurate, checked information in order to counterbalance the inaccurate information that is being shared. I absolutely acknowledge that it's a minefield working out which is information that's accurate and which isn't. And I have been known to share false information on my social media, and I have been challenged by friends over posts that I've shared, and I have removed them. I have one particular incident in mind where I shared quite a controversial post, and I was very angry with friends who challenged me over it. But it's only since that I've been preparing for this video that I've reflected back on it and thought actually it was an emotional response to a post that was created to have an emotional response and wanted people to share it. It was quite a manipulative post originally. And so I probably owe a few people apologies for my reaction to their challenges. I also recognise that it's not impossible that some of the conspiracy theories have truth in them. There have been examples in history of times that governments have covered things up or put spin on things to make us see them differently, and of that I'm absolutely in no doubt. And some governments are more prone to that than others. What I would say about that in relation to coronaviruses, for a lot of the conspiracy theories to be true, it would require a huge effort from hundreds of thousands of people across the world, between nations that normally can't agree on anything at all. And it would require scientists to be complicit in this deception, and I think there's just a sheer number of people that would have to be involved with most of these conspiracy theories. It just wouldn't work. Anybody who's been a team leader in any kind of project will know how difficult it can be to get people to do what you want them to do, and to have that kind of level of cooperation on such a massive scale without dissenters would be just too difficult. From my own personal point of view, there have been things that our government could have done better, but our best chance at the moment is to follow the advice of our government, of our scientists, to adhere to regulations. If for no other reason, then you could be fined or even worse. But if the scientists are right, if you've done your social distancing, if you've followed the regulations, if you've worn your mask when you can and should, you will have been part of the solution to a worldwide problem and contributed to saving several lives. If it turns out that none of that stuff was necessary for whatever reason, then we may have looked silly, but just the chances of that being the case are just so small. I do personally believe that all the scientists and most of the politicians do want the best for us. And certainly the medics do. I have friends who are working on the front line, who are doctors treating people on coronavirus wards and nurses treating people. I've heard some of their anecdotes, and it certainly makes me want to do everything I can to halt the spread. Anyway, do take care of yourselves and stay safe, and I very much hope that if we all work together that we will be able to get back together soon. See you again next week. Bye bye for now.